On November 18th, 1986, Helle Crafts was on the way home after a flight to Germany. With her friends in the car, she talked about the 2 turkeys she ordered for Thanksgiving and her special recipes. When they got to Helle's home in Newtown, she said, "Richard's home," very matter-of-factly. She got out of the car, carried her bags up the driveway, and her friend drove away. Helle Crafts was never seen again. This week, we have a grave retelling of the infamous murder of Helle Crafts. I'm Marina. With me, I have my 2 best friends, Colby and Laura, and this is Grim. Guys, we're back. First, we're just going to start off again saying we love all of you guys so much. Our gremlins are the best, and I love that people are calling themselves gremlins. And I just love that people want to listen to us talk. Oh, I just wanted to start off with actually pretty big true crime news. I think it's national because it got a catchy title, so people are interested in it, but it's definitely big news in Connecticut. The Fitbit murderer, Richard DeBate, got convicted by the jury on all counts for murdering his wife, Connie DeBate. So that's super interesting. Jury just came back. They just increased his bond from $1 million to $5 million. So he's going to be going to prison. I'm sure he's going to appeal everything. But those are going to go on for years and years and years. We are going to cover that case because it's really interesting. But yeah.
Awesome. Because I don't know that much about it for it happening in Connecticut, actually.
Yeah.
Same.
Yeah. It's called the Fitbit murder because they were using like the GPS data from her Fitbit to poke holes in his story of what happened. Brilliant. And show that he was lying and that he was the one that murdered his wife.
Husbands everywhere are going to stop buying their wives Fitbits. Totally unrelated to the ruling in this case, but no, Fitbit sales plummet.
Well, it's just really hard with technology nowadays. I mean, like, think about murdering someone in like the 1920s where there was no DNA evidence or blood evidence or anything like that, or cameras, versus nowadays. I mean, we're going to cover the Fotis Dulos, Jennifer Dulos disappearance too, but I mean, like, he was caught all over Hartford on people's Ring cameras. I mean, like, you can't go anywhere nowadays without a camera catching you unless you're in, like, I don't know, rural Wisconsin or something. But
like Plainfield would be, a good place to do it.
I'm bringing it back.
Yep.
I'm looping it back in. I like it.
Listen to episode 3.
Yeah, it's so good. So many nipple belts.
You just couldn't. You didn't say nipple enough in the.
I know. I
I
really
need one more nipple,
guys. If you want to stay abreast of all of our upcoming shows, you should follow us on Instagram. Yes. So this one's off the rails already. All right, here we go. So this week we are talking about the murder of Helle Crafts. This is a pretty infamous case, but I don't want to give away too much in the beginning for those listeners who don't know this story. What I will say is this was the first case in Connecticut state history that a murder trial proceeded without a body. So I'll give you that.
Ugh.
So here we go. Helle Lork Nielsen was born in Copenhagen, Denmark in 1947 on the 4th of July. Which, little firecracker.
Didn't mean much there, though. Right.
because Denmark.
Because it's Denmark. Oh, yeah. Merca. So, also, I'm ashamed at how, like, that didn't even process in my brain.
That'll be one of those long silences that Mike cuts for us.
Yeah. Yep. So, Helle Nielsen was extremely intelligent. She loved to learn. She was fluent in English, French, and Danish, and had a working knowledge of German, Norwegian, and Swedish, which is really impressive because I can barely speak English. And I've tried to learn other languages, and it's not going well, is what I'll say. So I find it very impressive when people can speak.
Those are hard ones. Those are hard languages.
Is there any overlap? Like Portuguese and Spanish has an overlap. Is there any overlap among those languages?
I don't know. I already forgot what languages.
There were 6. That's too many languages for any one person.
Probably not between like French. Actually, I don't know. They seem German scares me. That seems like a very difficult language to
It's like a
master.
love language, but people sound really angry when they say it sometimes. I was gonna like pretend speak German, and I was like,
No,
I
you'll
decided
offend-
against it.
You'll offend
Du
someone.
hast mich.
That was something. That's what that was.
I'm so sorry. Okay. So she attended college in England. She. All right, get it together. Fuck, murder. She attended college in England. She lived in France and worked as an au pair after college. But she wanted to travel the world. So at the age of 20, she started her career with Capital Airways as a flight attendant in France. She ended up working for Pan Am, which is what brought her to Miami, Florida for training, which is where she met Richard Crafts. So Richard Crafts was born in New York City in December 1937. His father was a former World War I pilot. He grew up in Connecticut and graduated from Darien High School. He actually dropped out of college to join the Marines in 1956, where he learned to fly like his dad. And while he was a Marine in 1960, he flew for Air America, which was a charter company that was a subsidiary of an arm of the CIA. And he participated in the secret war in Laos and Vietnam that was temporarily halted in 1961 because of the Geneva Accords. And then he rejoined in May 1962 until 1966. That sounds like a very tangential fact, but it may prove relevant later on.
I suppose you would be the authority on that. So, okay.
I'll loop
Trust
it back. I'll loop it back. So he returned to the States in 1966, and he got a job as an airline pilot working for Eastern Airlines, and he also ended up in Miami for training. So Richard and Helle met on May 24th, 1969, when they were training. They met each other at a bar near Miami Airport called Lenny's Hideaway, which sounds like a tropical bar that I would like to go drink at.
Yep.
I just picture like straw and thatch on the walls.
Yep.
With like
I pretty much picture this guy right here. This
Yeah,
guy
he
with
has a-
star sunnies and a nice drink.
for sure.
Yep.
There's definitely umbrellas on the drinks at Lenny's
Yes.
Hideaway, if I had to guess. So Helle was immediately attracted to Richard for whatever reason. Her friends were confused by the attraction, but apparently he was good looking, if not disheveled, but he had a romantic sounding past.
Same, man.
Okay, so he's like a little bit of mystery with the disheveled, like not completely put together, maybe.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think he had like
Pilot.
a handsome face, but like sort of crazy hair.
I can fix him.
I'm thinking like Manson
Oh.
a little bit.
Okay. I haven't looked at what he looks like.
Manson doesn't have a handsome face, but he has crazy hair. Anyways, I digress. So when they met, Richard was engaged to another woman, but they still dated each other on and off. So that sort of sets the tone for their relationship and how they are as people. Maybe not Helle, but Richard really just continued on with that throughout his relationship with Helle. And their relationship, it was on again, off again, but it was always stormy and characterized by fights. And when they were seeing each other, he was with other women. So they discussed that they would get married if she got pregnant. And now nothing helps a relationship like a child.
Yeah, really.
Definitely babies bringing couples together since the year one.
Yeah. I think like saying you're going to have a child to fix your relationship is like throwing a hand grenade into it and then just, yeah.
Well, you'd have fewer arms to deal with. So, makes sense.
So yeah, not a good idea. But so she got pregnant, and something that I read said he beat her.
Oh.
So she got an abortion. And then she got pregnant again, and he left for weeks and balked at the idea of marriage. So she scheduled another abortion, but he returned prior to that and said he'd marry her.
What a guy.
It was really romantic. So they were married on November 29th, 1975. She was 28 and 4 months pregnant, and Richard was 39. So they bought a house in Newtown on Newfield Lane, which Newtown is also pretty infamous now because of the school shootings, but it is a very well-to-do, quiet town prior to that. And in May 1976, their first son, Andrew, was born, and then they went on to have two more children, Thomas and Christina. So in the meantime, their rocky relationship continued. Richard continued to lie to cover up his affairs, and he would lie about his flight schedules. So I think basically he would say that he's coming back on Tuesday, but his flight would really come back Sunday, and he would just go be with his girlfriend in the meantime. And now Richard made a lucrative salary. He was making over $120,000 a year by 1985. And something I read said he earned 3 times more than Helle, but he made her pay for household expenses, the children's clothes, most of the nanny's salary, and her Toyota Tercel. While he went off and bought whatever he wanted, he bought very expensive, like a backhoe. He bought like expensive equipment to use for no reason whatsoever.
Just because. Yep.
And he also was an avid gun collector. He had pistols and rifles and hand grenades.
Oh, wow. Really coming full circle on that one.
Yep. Bringing the hand grenades back in. So there's at least one instance where they said that Richard may have been physically abusive towards her. Now, I did read again that when she was originally pregnant, he beat her, and that's why she had the abortion. But when I was looking at other information, it said that he was physically abusive on at least one occasion. So I'm not sure exactly how abusive he was, but on this, at least on this one occasion, and once is more than enough.
Just going to say that. Yep.
Yeah. So he hit her hard enough that she got a black eye. This was in 1977. The Crafts were visiting their friends in New Hampshire. And this is so bizarre. Richard reached over the dinner table and squeezed a pimple on her nose, making her bleed. So she jumped up and kicked him in the leg, and he stood up and slugged her in the face. This is like at the dinner table with their friends.
If that's in public, can you imagine what was happening?
Right,
in their
behind
own home?
closed doors.
Yeah.
That escalated really quick, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which makes me think it's definitely not the first. That's like the first time known, but it can't, that's not, that wouldn't be the first time.
Yeah, it's just really it's just a very bizarre situation. And so she ended up falling to the floor, and the friend said that Richard's expression was impassive the whole time. And Helle went to sleep in the guest room, and she said, you can just not join me. That would be great. And she said that they all just proceeded to ignore her bruised face, and no one said anything about it afterwards.
Weird.
Really-
Bad friends.
Really weird.
Yeah, guys, if anything like that ever happens in our group, let's say something about that, because that just doesn't...
If you see something, say something.
Yes, if you see something, you should say something.
Yeah. I mean, this is 1977. Was it a little bit more acceptable for men to be hitting women? I'm not saying it should have been. I'm just saying,
I don't know that it would have been, but more like maybe it wasn't as like normal for the woman to like speak out, or for her friends to speak up for her or something and say like, don't do that.
I always wonder how these reports come out too. Like who gave that? Was it a friend, or was it like, how do we know this story happened? Because that perspective also changes.
Right.
What actually happened.
I believe this was testimony at the trial from the friends that witnessed it.
Interesting.
As I believe where it came from. But again, so at least one situation where he was physically abusive towards her, and it was witnessed. So Richard was gone from the home for days at a time. He would just disappear with his bags, and Helle would never know where he was or whether he was coming back. He was a pilot, so he would leave for days at a time, but she said he'd also leave for gun shows, and she just never knew where he was, when he was coming back, what was going on. And apparently even the minimal time that he spent at home was too much, because in 1982, he started a career as an unpaid hobby cop with the Newtown Police. So he volunteered for free to be basically like a constable for the cops, like a rent-a-cop. Think like Paul Blart. And he was really into this. He bought himself a Crown Victoria to make himself feel like a cop. Now, this is concerning to me, because I have seen people who want to be cops or corrections officers, or they just crave that position of power so badly that they would do it for free. And those are the precise people that you do not want in positions of power. At all. And now I did read that he would also like respond to calls that he wasn't supposed to be at, and would just like listen to the radio and show up, and like just way over the top, like just way over the top. So around 1984, doctors discovered that Richard had colon cancer and only gave him a 2% chance of survival. So he underwent surgery and they took 1.5 feet of intestine, lymph nodes, and a section of his liver. And Helle cared for him after his surgery and during chemotherapy like a loving, caring wife. He was out of work during that initial cancer diagnosis and treatment, but he was able to return to work as a pilot in December 1985. In February 1986, he started as a Southbury auxiliary constable for $7 an hour. So an upgrade from his Newtown hobby cop position. Yes, now he's getting $7 an hour. He was finished with his chemo in July 1986. So that was in the summer. It was around that time that Helle hired a divorce lawyer. She said, I'm done. She suspected him of cheating. They did not have a loving relationship and he was constantly missing. So she told the divorce lawyer that 9 years earlier he had been abusive. That was that time in 1977. And she also told her that she suspected that he was cheating on her. So she told her to hire a private investigator. So in September, she hired Keith Mayo, who was a former police officer, and he was hired to look into Richard and his extramarital affairs. In September 1986, while this was going on, Helle told a friend, if I disappear, it won't be an accident.
Oh.
Okay.
So I can't imagine what's going on behind closed doors where you would just say that to a friend.
Yeah.
So Richard had an appointment with his oncologist on October 2nd. By this time, Helle had told him that she wanted a divorce, and he allegedly tried to thwart the breakup by telling her that his cancer had returned and that he wouldn't take his meds.
He is terrible.
Wonderful human being.
Like, I haven't heard one reading thing about him. Except for maybe his disheveled hair.
It gets so much worse.
I was afraid of that.
Yep. Well, I mean, you know what he did to her, but our listeners are still suspense. We're in suspense. She found out he was lying. I think she called his oncologist, found out that he was still in remission, and found out he was lying. In October, Helle found out about Keith Mayo's findings. He confirmed that Richard was having an affair with an Eastern Airlines flight attendant from New Jersey named Nancy Dodd. So she was committed to proceeding with the divorce because she confirmed her suspicions. And now the divorce lawyer also had that information to include in the divorce decree. So in October, she said to a friend, if anything happens to me, don't assume it was an accident. So, I mean, she's really like, she can feel that something bad is looming.
Also, if somebody says that, that's not just a like, okay, I'll put it in my calendar. Like, shouldn't you do something about that as a friend? Like, hey, are you in danger? Like, do you need help?
Like, maybe you should get out of the house.
Yeah. Like,
I think she was really concerned about her children because she had 3 kids at the time too. So it's not about just her leaving the house. I mean, she'd have to get rid of all of the kids too. And I think there's probably a huge concern that he's a Southbury police officer with ties to the Newtown cops. And it's like, is anybody going to believe her over him? And
good point.
Yep.
So there's like a lot of underlying things going on.
How old are the kids at this time? Do we know?
They were 10, 7 or 8. That was 10, 7 or 8 and 5.
Okay.
yeah,
So young
that's
kids.
hard.
They're young, yes. So in a letter in October, Helle told her mother that she had informed Richard that she wanted a divorce and that he was, quote, seemingly not happy about the idea. So by this time, Helle had confronted Richard with the evidence of his infidelity. She demanded a divorce, and Richard knew that this would cost him dearly financially. And he also knew that she was planning to seek custody of the children in the divorce. So November 12th, the divorce writ was ready to go. Richard Crafts said that he was willing to accept service of it, but then he said the sheriff was unavailable to serve the document. But then when they talked to the sheriff said, no, I was available. Richard never called me back. So November 14th, Richard and Helle had a huge fight. She had found receipts that he was buying toys for the children with his girlfriend in New Jersey. Oh. So Richard again said he was ready and willing to accept service of the divorce writ. And he was going to be served that day while the kids were out of the house. She was trying to spare him the embarrassment. And he snuck out the back of the house with the kids. They were going to serve him the next day, but he was flying. The divorce papers were never served because, again, on November 18th, Helle's friend dropped her off around 7 p.m. after her trip, and that was the last time that anyone saw her. So at the time of Helle's disappearance, they had a live-in nanny, Dawn Marie Thomas. She was 19 years old. She was home that night, but she worked a second job, so she didn't come home until around 2 a.m. There was a snowstorm that night, too, so it took her longer to get home than usual. And the nanny actually said that she thought she heard Helle cough around 3 a.m. She was getting over from a cold, thought she heard her cough, and that proved to be a snag in the trial later on in terms of the timeline. So starting on November 18th into the 19th, there was a 3-day storm. It started out as snow and transitioned to heavy rain over the next few days. That also is important. So on November 19th, around 6 a.m., Richard got everyone up in a hurry and said that they need to go to his sister's house in Westport. The power had gone out because of the snow, and he said it was too cold. He wanted to get everyone out due to the lack of heat, even though they had kerosene heaters, a fireplace, and a generator in the house. Dawn said that Richard was uncharacteristically in a hurry. She said they also left out the front door instead of the garage. And Dawn asked where Helle was, and Richard said she was probably already at his sister's house and they would meet her there. So when they got there, Helle wasn't there, and Richard didn't say anything about it. So Dawn asked where Helle was, and Richard said he didn't know.
I'm trying to put myself in any of these situations. Like, I know I like to know where everybody is at any given time, but that would be so unacceptable to me. I'd be like, well, is she coming? Is she driving? What other car? I'd have so many questions.
Right, and why would she leave by herself in the middle of a snowstorm after she had just been out flying the night before? I mean, she'd be at home resting. She wouldn't go on her own.
Yeah.
So Richard ran errands during the day. He went to Caldor's, which... throwback. I don't know if anybody remembers.
I remember Caldor.
Yep. Yeah, good. That's actually where Walmart is in Southington now. That's where it was.
Oh.
Yeah. But so he went to Caldor and he bought 2 comforters and 2 pillows. And he also went to the bank to deposit $300 for Helle's curtain business. So she had a side curtain business with her friend. And then he went back and he picked the kids and the nanny up at his sister's house around 7 p.m. And the nanny said that he fell asleep behind the wheel on the way home.
Oh.
So he was tired.
Which is also because he was a pilot, right?
Yes, he was a pilot.
Wasn't he used to being up for long periods of time, or I don't know?
You would think so, but I mean, if he was really busy and had a lot of adrenaline the night before, then that would make you...
That's why I'm saying it's maybe suspicious.
That would make you tired. It's a little suspicious. It's a little suspicious.
All of this is, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. So the morning of November 20th, Richard told Dawn, the nanny, Helle called and she said she's on her way to see her sick mother in Denmark. So that same day, Richard Crafts called her friend, Helle's friend, Rita, to say that Helle had phoned from London. She'd left the previous morning, the morning of the snowstorm, to go see her sick mother in Denmark. And now this friend, Rita, said that she had just talked to Helle about her mother 4 days prior, and she hadn't mentioned she was sick. And he said that Helle told her to give her a check for $300. And she would know what it was for. This is the $300 that he had deposited in the bank a couple days prior. I would have to say this is pretty diabolical, because if I was a friend and I got this piece of information that I think that only me and her would know about, then it would sort of throw me off the scent for a minute, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the friends kept calling the house and they were concerned, especially because she was starting to miss work. And that was very unlike her. She was missing her flights and she wasn't calling in to say that she was missing the flights.
Yeah.
So one of the friends kept bugging Richard saying, you know, if you don't call and let them know that she needs an emergency leave, she's going to lose her job. Richard never did. He kept saying the lines were busy, or he told the friends that they should do it themselves. But the airlines were like, the husband has to call. And it was just,
If this wasn't about, if this wasn't part of a grim podcast, I would just think he's a major procrastinator because everything he's like, yeah, I'll just get divorced tomorrow, or like I'll call tomorrow. Like I can relate to that stuff, but
Yeah.
not the rest of it.
What was his reasoning for why she wouldn't have contacted anybody? It's like they don't have phones in Denmark or in England anywhere.
Maybe
like,
long distance, I guess, is expensive, but still, none of this altogether. It's way too suspicious.
Yeah.
So like some of the things that he said and did were smart. I'll give him credit for that. Like depositing the check and then saying that the money was in the bank for the curtain business and so that he knew about that. But I think the thing that he did that was not smart was giving people inconsistent answers as to where she may have been. So he told some people he didn't know where she was. He told his friend that she was seeing a sick mother in Denmark. He told another person, I don't know. She left with a large suitcase and a fur coat that friend knew was stored at a cleaner. He told someone else, I think she's going to visit friends in the Canary Islands. So, I mean, he gave like a bunch of different excuses.
And they were probably talking to one another. At least a couple of them
I would
probably
hope
knew each
so,
other.
yeah. They're like, hey, is she in the Canary Islands? The other one's like, no, I thought she was with her mother in Denmark.
Yeah.
Doing both, globetrotting.
Right.
And they're like really different. Like it's not like, I just got what
she
city
went
wrong.
she went from Denmark to the Canary Islands. She went from helping her ailing mother to vacation with her friends. And he actually was giving out, for the ones that he was telling that she was visiting the sick mother, he was giving people a phone number for her mother. So it was not a valid number. And I believe the people that were answering were speaking in Danish. So they couldn't understand or figure out how to get the correct number. Well, they found a friend that spoke Danish. So they called and they got the correct number for the mother. And they didn't want to alarm her. They were just like, can we talk to Helle? She's staying with you. And the mother's like, no, she's not. She's not coming until April. So they called Richard to confront him with this information. And he was like, she's old and dumb and probably didn't understand what you were talking about. She was confused.
Ugh. So. The mother. Okay, I'm like, Helle is old and dumb? Like your wife?
No.
Although he probably would talk about her like that. He
probably would talk about her that way, yeah.
Right. And Helle, previously to her disappearance, she had written letters to her mother every 2 to 3 weeks and called every week or two. And she hadn't spoken to her mother until November 17th. Since November 17th. So the other weird thing is the nanny noticed that Helle's address book and the numbers listed on the back of the kitchen cabinet for emergencies were missing, as was the nanny's address book that contained all of Helle's friends' numbers in case of an emergency.
So nobody could contact all of her friends. Yeah.
Yep.
So November 20th and the 21st, Richard was on duty as a constable for the town of Southbury, and he reported inconsistently. So that's good to know. On November 22nd, the nanny noticed a large grapefruit-sized dark stain on the rug of the Crafts' bedroom. Crafts told Dawn it was kerosene, which nobody really thought about at the time, is colorless and the odor does not last.
Also, why?
Well, his story was that when they lost power, he had the kerosene heaters and he said he had them in the bedroom and he was filling them up and it spilled on the carpet.
Still dumb, but not as dumb. Okay.
So the next day, Richard went and ordered carpet for the 3 bedrooms in the house, because what better time to redecorate than when your wife is missing?
And he's not telling anyone he's concerned at this point.
No. In fact, he told her friends that they were watching too much Miami Vice.
That's a good point though. So no missing persons report has been filed yet.
No, because she's not missing.
She's not missing. She's traveling.
Right. She's traveling. She went to Denmark. He doesn't know, or she's in the Canary Islands.
Nobody knows. Yeah.
Right. She could be anywhere, but she's not. She's not missing.
That's the one place she is not.
Yeah, he doesn't know where she is, and he said that she would just disappear for weeks on end, but there was no information to substantiate that.
Mothers of 3 often disappear for weeks on end without a reason. Yeah,
right. So remember back to the beginning, she had been in the car talking about her 2 turkeys for Thanksgiving and her special recipes. So she just misses Thanksgiving. Leaves her 3 children, misses the holidays,
I
misses
wasn't even
Thanksgiving.
thinking
that's really concerning. That's more concerning because it seems like she gets excited for the holidays. So this would be like a time she's looking forward to. Why is she not there?
Correct. So very suspicious.
This poor nanny is like the only one who's like, what is going on here?
Right.
She has like the most information out of anyone.
Right. Well, she did see the suspicious stain on the carpet. So on December 1st, her friends called Helle's divorce lawyer, which the divorce lawyer also thought it was interesting that she hadn't heard from her. She said because normally people are hounding about whether the divorce writ has been served or, they're following up on that, and she hadn't heard from her. So the friends called the divorce lawyer, and the divorce lawyer called Keith Mayo, who was advised. He talked to a friend of his who's a lawyer, and he said, you need to file a missing person report with Newtown before you start digging around for her. Because, Keith was a former police officer, so he was, ready to investigate, but he was like, file a missing person report. So Richard never filed a missing person report. This came from Keith Mayo, who told Newtown police. So Keith Mayo went to the Newtown police that day on December 1st. And the Newtown police just didn't seem that worried at first. They just weren't that interested in the case. Remember, Richard also was a former Newtown hobby cop.
Well,
so,
and if I'm the police, I'm like, but her husband isn't reporting her missing.
Yeah, her husband's not worried. I know him. He's such a good guy.
Right.
Like, if something was wrong, like he would be showing signs of something
really
being wrong.
blame them, I guess. But
right. And now at this time, Helle's car was parked in the airport parking lot. So that sort of set up the story that she took off, flew away to Denmark or Canary Islands or wherever she seemed to go. So on December 3rd, the police talked to Richard, and he said he hadn't seen his wife since November 19th. And he said that he hadn't reported his wife missing. It was because it was for Helle's reputation and his own. He didn't want to air his dirty linen in public. And I quote, he told the police that she'd run off with her boyfriend, who was from Westchester, New York.
okay.
So that's another news story. So the police asked Richard if he would take a lie detector test. And he's like, yep, no problem. So December 4th, takes a lie detector test, and he passes with flying colors. And Newtown PD says, see, he didn't do it. He didn't murder her. No,
what did they ask him on the lie detector test?
I did not write it down, but it was like, did you murder your wife? Like, they were like very pointed questions. So I'm circling back now. So the polygrapher said he doesn't show any response. I've had only one other subject whose response was so flat. Remember that Richard was a pilot for an arm of the CIA during the secret war in Vietnam. So they suspected that he may have been trained
to beat a polygraph.
Right. They said that basically you would like hurt yourself when you were answering baseline questions, like biting your lip or digging your fingernails into your, like really hurting yourself so that your truthful baseline answers were elevated so that when you were lying and your heart rate actually spikes, it would you would stop hurting yourself and it would match the truthful answers that you were giving.
I'm just taking notes for when I have to take a polygraph.
when you have to fake. I mean, and now lie detector tests are not given the same sort of credibility that they were previously. Like, people understand that they're wrong all the time because if I took one, I'm like such an anxious person. They'd be like, you're lying about your name. And I'm like, I swear I'm not. I'm that nervous.
Here's my birth certificate.
Right. Tell us your facts in the beginning of the episode. my heart rate would be skyrocketed.
Yeah. So Newtown police was like, well, that's good enough for us. He didn't do it. Like, he's one of us. One of us. So, but Keith Mayo didn't buy it. So he continued to conduct his own investigation on the side. He actually dug through the local dump with a team of people for 3 days looking for the rug that came from the house because they were like, he got rid of this rug. It has to be somewhere. So they're looking for the rug with blood on it. So they found something that looked similar and it ended up getting taken to the crime lab. And Keith Mayo actually contacted the prosecutor who notified the state police. There's like a major crime squad that got involved, and that started garnering additional interest in the case. So interestingly, Dawn, concerned for her safety, left the house around December 18th. The next day, Richard reported her missing to the Newtown police.
This is the nanny, right?
So the next day, so she goes, this nanny leaves the house, and 1 day later, he calls the police and reports her missing. But he never reported Helle missing. And he called his sister Karen to tell her that Dawn was missing, the nanny. And he told her, he complained that the Newtown police, quote, think I've chopped off Helle's head. Which nobody has said anything like that whatsoever.
I was actually going to ask, so they did the polygraph, so they suspected murder at this point. Or they just were like, she's missing.
I
And
think
like,
they
also, by the
suspected-
way, did you murder her?
I think they suspected foul play.
Okay.
So, I
Yeah.
mean, she's completely missing. So, unless they think she's like held in a cabin somewhere, kidnapped, I'm assuming they thought she was dead at the time. And despite Helle's absence, the Craft Christmas cards were sent out with her name on it. So, really, just going forward with that story about she just walked up and left her 3 children to go do whatever she's doing. So on Christmas Eve in 1986, the judge signed the search warrant to search the Craft home for evidence. So the probable cause for the warrant was completely circumstantial, but it was enough for the warrant. So they were relying on the fact that Helle had hired a PI to look into Craft's infidelity. Helle wanted a divorce. The statements she made to her friend about if something happens to me, it's not an accident. Look into it. The dark patch on the Craft's rug that the nanny indicated was there, and the inconsistent statements that Richard was telling to the friends and acquaintances. So the next day prior to the search of the home, the prosecutor delivered a letter to the Newtown Police Department removing them from the case. So the state police would now have exclusive jurisdiction over the case.
Good.
Because, right?
In this case, yes.
Yes. So the prosecutor did not feel that the Newtown police were taking the case seriously and said that there may have been some bias because of Craft's relationship to their department. And one of the Newtown detectives had said that Crafts was cleared of murder after he passed the polygraph, and that rubbed the prosecutor the wrong way. So the prosecutor just didn't think they were capable of fairly investigating the case, and the state police took over. So the police executed the search warrant the day after Christmas. They found a note dated December 23rd from Richard that was fastened to a cupboard, and it said, quote, "Helle, I'm at my mother's with the children. Please come. We love you. I have your car with me, and keys for the truck and the rabbit are on the stairs. The Ford is out of commission." So the note was dated December 23rd, but Richard left with the children for vacation in Florida on the 22nd.
All of this is so strange. Like, I wish I knew what was going through his head. Like, I don't know. It's all weird.
She'll be home tomorrow.
Yeah, like why of all days she would come home that day and find a note and be like, oh, okay, I'll get in the Ford.
So he planted the note knowing that the cops were going to come search, but I don't understand the date. So he dates it December 23rd. They left the 22nd. And they confirmed that he made a purchase in New Jersey on the 23rd. So it's not like he swung back and like dropped off the note.
No.
It's not like they left for Florida and he was like, oh, I forgot to leave a note. And then they go back to the house. Like he was gone. So why would you date the note for after you have left?
Well, and I was going to say some days I don't know the actual date, but it's right near Christmas. Like you probably do know the date at that point.
Right. And you also know the day that you're leaving.
Right. Yeah.
So basically just flagged for the police that Richard knew the police were coming. Also, when they tried the Ford, it did work. So for him to say it was out of commission, they were like, why even? Yeah, like why? Just
weird
why?
detail.
So the police searched the house. They noticed that several pieces of the carpet in the master bedroom had been removed, along with the padding underneath. And they could see that in the areas where the padding was not removed, that it was still in good condition. And the spot where the nanny had said that there was a dark grapefruit-sized stain had also been removed. And they also saw the house was in complete disarray. Like the furniture was all rearranged. There was dirty laundry everywhere. So basically Helle leaves and the house just falls apart because he did nothing and she took care of the house and the children. But the furniture being rearranged, I think, was actually like a diversionary tactic so that they couldn't try to piece together a story or where things had been or look for evidence. So they brought in a woman who had helped Helle decorate and had her put the room back together the way that it had been.
What pressure for that woman.
Right, right.
We were like, oh, I don't know. Was the table on that side of the room? Was it on this side? I don't know.
You think maybe she has like photos or like schematics,
Oh, that makes more
blueprints or
sense.
something,
Yeah.
you know, if you're like ordering something for someone's home.
I guess. Yeah. Sure.
But yeah, I mean, you wouldn't know maybe exactly which way,
I just remembered because otherwise she could just send them the pictures. Right?
Yeah.
So
She could. They had photos in 19.
But not cell phones with photos. So.
1986, right? No, they weren't texting photos to each other. But I think, maybe she had schematics.
they did indeed have cameras in 1976.
Yes, 86. Also, I really
86.
like the word schematics, so I'm just going to say it one more time. So she put the room back the way that it had been before so that they could look for evidence where they would expect it to be based on the information that they had.
Okay.
So they brought in Dr. Henry Lee, which we all
love me some Dr. Henry Lee.
Yep.
So we all know and love him. At this time, he was a young forensic scientist that was employed with the state. Now he is one of the world's foremost forensic scientists. He's been called into work on the most notorious cases, including John Bonet, O.J. Simpson, Lacey Peterson, D.C. sniper shootings, and he actually reinvestigated the assassination of John F. Kennedy.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Fascinating. So he's like super smart. He's also come in to talk to one of my law school classes and like showed us crime scene photos. And he's just like the smartest, coolest dude.
That's awesome.
As a quick aside, I was watching the Staircase documentary on Netflix.
Great
and
documentary.
He's in there, and I am just fascinated by this, right? They're doing all these jury interviews and like focus groups to see how people would respond to him.
And they don't like him,
And they
right?
don't like him, and they don't believe him, and they don't trust him. And then, later on, I won't exactly spoil it, but there's like the state's like blood specialist or whatever his title is, and the other guy is not good at his job, like notoriously like lies, ruins other people's lives. And it's funny because the prosecution's like, well, you signed his book, like he has your book and you signed it, like great work, keep up the good job. And he was just kind of like, what am I supposed to say? Like, do better, kid? Like, he's like, that's what you write when a fan approaches you. So I just think it's funny that he keeps popping up now that we've started to just get into more true crime. Like he's kind of everywhere.
Oh yeah, he's involved in everything. Like he is the foremost person. So he came in to do his chemical tests with his team of scientists. So he found a blood smear on the Crafts mattress and on towels and washcloths in the bathroom. So he did the luminol test and it came up highlighter blue. And he later confirmed that the blood smear on the mattress was consistent with Helle's blood type. So the police ended up searching the home for 48 hours, which seems like a very long time, but they were saying that they go in and they have to take pictures of absolutely everything so that lawyers can't go in later and say evidence was planted or moved or anything like
Makes
that.
sense.
So that would be very time consuming to catalog everything like that. And the police actually towed Richard's Ford Crown Vic to the state police headquarters, which will prove to be a mistake later on. So after the search, the police really didn't have anything to go on. So they found this blood smear, but even if Dr. Lee matched the blood type on the mattress and towels to Helle, there's no body and they have nothing to go on.
And if it wasn't a lot, like she could have cut herself shaving or like, right, could just been any kind of a cut, right? It wasn't a ton of blood on the mattress. It was just like a streak.
Right. And it didn't even have to be during that time frame.
Right,
So you think about like, if you looked at my mattress, like there might be blood on the side of it from, like you said, if you're shaving your leg or something like that, or a cat or something. Though I don't think, do cats have the same blood type as humans?
Oh, I thought you meant from a cat scratch.
I thought so too. Yeah, I'm like many of those.
That makes
Let's
more
go
sense.
with that. Let's go with that. So the state police were just getting frustrated because they just really didn't have enough to go on. And they felt like Newtown Police Department had been holding out on them on critical information, which they had said that they had told them everything, but they hadn't told them a key piece of information. So in a desperate attempt for additional information, one of the state police detectives stopped by Southbury Police Department to ask if anyone saw anything strange on the night of the storm. The state police detective was told for the first time that one of the Southbury officers, Richard Wildman, had seen Crafts with a wood chipper that night. So the Southbury Police Department had not thought that that information was important because no one's imagination was as horrifying as reality. So the Southbury Police Department mentioned that a roads department driver, Joey Hine, had also spotted a wood chipper after midnight on River Road. So the state police were like, no. They were like, no.
After midnight?
After midnight, yes, he had seen the wood chipper.
Like just casually on the side of the road, not on anybody's property, just like out in the wild.
Parked on a bridge. Yep, U-Haul, wood chipper on the bridge.
Oh,
Okay.
the U-Haul makes it weird too. Mm-hmm. And it was the middle of a snowstorm, right?
It was.
That
So
turned into
the
rain,
timing,
I guess. But
the timing is really weird. So Joey Hine swears that it was the night of the 18th into the 19th. that he saw this. He said because he recalls he worked his normal shift, and then he ended up getting woken up by his wife to go in to plow the snow because the snow came earlier than he thought. So he was driving by, slowly plowing, and stopped and saw this wood chipper. So he's looking at it. So he swears that it was that night. It couldn't have been that night based on receipts and the timing when they investigate it. So there's some sort of disconnect there. But, you know, people convince themselves of certain things and the timing of things. So, like, what are the odds that on another night he saw someone who wasn't Richard Crafts with a wood chipper just casually doing what they're doing, chipping wood into the river?
Yeah.
So two detectives find this Joey Hine, and he said that he saw this wood chipper in the early morning hours of November 19th. This is while he was out clearing snow. And again, he said it was positive it was the 19th because he'd worked his normal shift and got called in. And then he said he saw the chipper again around 5:30 down by the bridge. So this witness, Joey Hine, he brought them to Lake Zor. And the detectives there could see that the wood chips were about an inch thick and they had been spread out with a pitchfork or a shovel. So they knew they were in the right area. They noticed a piece of paper and some stained bright blue material on the riverbank. And one of the detectives picked up the envelope, and it was an envelope from the American Cancer Society, and it had one of those cellophane windows, and it said Miss Helle Crafts.
Ooh, goosebumps.
Ooh, yeah.
And one of the detectives said, "Can you imagine a chipper? I'll retire if this guy put her through a chipper."
Oh, I have full-blown goosebumps right now.
Full body chills. So Hines wasn't the only witness. There was another witness, Joe Williams, who said on November 20th, which seems to be the correct date, he heard a loud noise. He saw a truck and a wood chipper in operation on this bridge. He saw 2 piles of wood and bags of plastic or cloth in the back of the truck. So it was on a U-Haul truck. And he said that he saw a man cowering between the truck and the wood chipper. And he said the man was wearing a green poncho and a wide-brimmed hat like police wear.
Or constable wear.
Or rent-a-cops. Paul Blart. And then this other man, Richard Wildman, who was a Southbury constable, had seen Richard Crafts parked. Now, just a reminder, Richard Crafts was working that night as a Southbury constable on November 20th and the 21st. And
This is when he was inconsistent.
Yes, he had reported in regularly. So Richard Wildman said that he saw Richard Crafts parked in a parking lot at a Southbury school around 4 a.m., and he was with a U-Haul and a wood chipper. And Wildman asked him about the wood chipper, and Kraft said that he was just cleaning up limbs from the November 18th storm.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah. Oh, there was no pun intended, but... So no limbs had been down during the storm, and there was no other need for the wood chipper.
Saying limbs.
Limbs. So Wildman saw the U-Haul again around 4:30 in the commuter lot. So the police now are like, okay, a wood chipper. Like they wouldn't have imagined this in their wildest dreams. This wasn't information that Newtown and Southbury were withholding from the state police. Right. They just didn't have the imagination for reality.
Yep.
So the police start looking in this area of Lake Zor along this riverbank. So they sent in a dive team to search the lake. And when the state police divers begin their search, Richard tells his brother-in-law, "Let them dive. There's no body. It's gone." So that seems suspicious.
Yeah. It's in Denmark. Just kidding.
So the dive team found a chainsaw and a saw blade underwater near the bridge. The saw and saw blade both contain blood tissue and hair fragment. The chainsaw had the serial number filed off, but they were able to recover the serial number, and it matched a receipt that was actually in Keith Mayo's possession. Helle had turned over a pile of papers when she began her investigation for the divorce, and one of those papers was the receipt for the chainsaw.
Yikes.
So they were able to confirm that that was Richard Crafts' chainsaw. Now, it meant nothing to Keith Mayo when he had seen it in December, because, again, they're not thinking that like a chainsaw and a wood chipper were involved. So a team of people thawed the snow and sifted through the soil on the edge of this lake looking for evidence and bone fragments. Henry Lee's team worked around the clock for 2 weeks, and he estimated it took up to a tenth of his budget for the entire year.
Wow.
When Dr. Lee had compiled what had been given to him from this River Road area, he had 69 certifiably human bones, with the largest being only 1.5 inches long, weighing a total 3/4 of an ounce. So we're talking like slivers of bone that they found.
Yikes.
5 droplets of blood, 2 tooth caps, 2,660 strands of blonde hair, which, side note, who was responsible for counting those? Because I would lose count midway and be like, oh no, I have to start over again.
That was actually my thought, is who pissed somebody off that day and had to count the hairs.
That was the intern.
And yeah, they were probably doing it for free, if I had to guess. They were like, you're responsible for the hair and it's free. Bye.
Yep.
3 ounces of human tissue, a portion of a finger, a polished fingernail, and a toenail. And they also found a piece of blue fabric that was similar to clothing that Helle had been wearing that night.
I'm blown away that they could find this at all, in just thinking about how small all those pieces must have been.
I think so. I believe they did some sifting on the actual bank of the river, but I believe they also brought stuff back in trash bags and were like sifting through like 30 trash bags of soil that they were sifting through to get these pieces.
That's crazy.
And now Dr. Lee also searched the Ford Crown Vic, and in the trunk he found hair, human flesh, bone fragments, and the same blue fibers that they had found.
So I'm putting a couple things
good.
together. So in the note, when the fake note he leaves, that's dated for the day after he leaves for his fake vacation or wherever he goes, he tells her not to get in the Ford or something because it's out of commission. It's out of commission because it's got a shit ton of evidence in the trunk of it.
Yes,
Yeah.
very important
So
evidence.
he's probably trying to keep them away from looking at it because, the car doesn't work. Why? Like, why would I check this car?
Right.
Smart.
Though, I mean, you're specifically putting it in this note and drawing attention to it. So, like, I'm just thinking that backfired. But so this was all prior to DNA technology. So they couldn't genetically confirm the tissue belonged to Helle, but they did match the blood type. So they did not have a body. All they had was that list of things that I mentioned that didn't amount to much.
What percentage would have to have been considered a body? I'm laughing, but really, I mean, do you need like 100 ounces of flesh?
I'm just saying in general, when they're investigating a murder, they find a torso or a full body or something. They don't find like 3 ounces of human tissue.
That's fair.
So they needed something. They needed a death to charge Crafts with murder. They couldn't charge him with murder until they had a body and or a death.
Because what they found doesn't necessarily imply somebody is dead, right? It's just because of it's such a small amount.
Yeah.
Like the fingertip, somebody could have cut off your finger to torture you, right? Or like a few drops of blood. Maybe they stabbed you, but it wasn't fatal. So I could kind of see where they're going with this.
They could have. And again, you don't have the DNA technology, so you just have
Right.
the blood type matching. And his defense at trial actually was that she gone girled him. Like a very, very violent version of Gone Girl, where she like left her fingertips and nails and bones and teeth and just bounced and left her 3 children and framed him for murder.
That would be brilliant.
Yeah. But I mean, that's like a very violent version of Gone Girl.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Like leaving teeth and fingertips. Like, I don't know, really aggressive. But again, you're going to leave your 3 children. Like that was like a key.
The husband, yes, absolutely. But
Yeah.
the 3 children, I don't see it.
Yeah. No. So this is where, again, so they don't have the body. They need the body or a homicide. Like they need the homicide to charge Crafts with murder. So this is where H. Wayne Carver II comes in. He was the state's acting medical examiner and becomes the chief medical examiner later on. This is a grim fact. I didn't know this. So he actually became the acting medical examiner because his predecessor had lost her job, partly because her Dobermans had been discovered in the autopsy room licking blood from feet and the floor.
Oh, no. Oh, dogs love feet.
I was going to
so
say
much.
my
I'm so
dogs
sad
love
for
licking
them.
feet, but
Gross.
Wouldn't let him in there.
Yeah, gross.
That's not a place you
There
should
would also
take
be
your dog
dog
to
hair
work.
everywhere.
No, that's not dog friendly.
No.
So again, improper disposal of a dead body is actually only a misdemeanor. So unless Dr. Carver agreed that Helle had been murdered, they couldn't arrest him. So this forensic team, the detectives, and the chief medical examiner all met to discuss the evidence that they had. The two most important pieces of evidence were this tooth that had a dental crown attached to it and a piece of a bone from a skull that they said had been disconnected in a barbaric way. Now, going to the teeth, apparently Helle had very soft teeth, and her dentist had worked on almost every one of her teeth with numerous root canals and 13 crowns, including 2 crowns surrounding a false tooth. And her last visit with her dentist was on October 30th, 1986. So, 2 weeks before she went missing, when he took a full set of x-rays. So they had a forensic dentist on Henry Lee's team, Dr. Lee's team, ID this tooth crown that was found on the water's edge and confirmed it with Helle's dental records. So he said, yes, he said
insane.
This tooth crown. And he testified at trial that they have to take x-rays of this tooth from all these different angles to say that it's the same size and shape and the same tooth. So they looked at the forensic evidence, they looked at the state police evidence, and Carver declared that the manner of death was homicide. So the chief medical examiner's office issued a death certificate on January 13th, 1987. And the death certificate was weird because it officially, Helle had died in Meriden, Connecticut on January 13th.
Oh.
Yeah, because that's when he declared it a homicide and when they have the information. So it's a little bit bizarre. So with the death certificate, the state police detectives went and got an arrest warrant. So Crafts was arrested in the very early morning hours of January 14th. On January 13th, a lieutenant was at his house and they called Richard and said, "We have an arrest warrant. Come out. Don't make this difficult." Yep. Richard said, "I'm tired. I'll take care of it in the morning."
See, procrastinator.
I'll do it tomorrow.
See,
you're right. He is a procrastinator. Can you imagine the cops are like, we have a warrant for your arrest. Just come out. And you're like, I'll see you within the morning.
I can imagine that. I
just need a good night's sleep. Just go away. So the lieutenant said, "I swear to God, this is what I say to my kids. I'm not asking you. I'm telling you. I'm not asking you. Come out. I have your arrest warrant." So another detective called him. He said the same thing. It seemed like there was sort of like a standoff situation, like they didn't know what was going to go on. He finally agreed to come out after midnight, and then he said he just wanted to put the kids to bed, and then he said he just wanted another minute, but he finally came out around 12:30 a.m., so I think technically he was arrested on January 14th.
Okay.
The children were put in the temporary custody of the Crafts' longtime friend, and then Richard's sister ended up caring for the children and getting custody for them. So let's go back. What did Richard do here? So despite there being no body, police were able to piece together most of what had happened thanks to witnesses, forensic science, and a good old paper trail. Mm-hmm. So Richard Crafts had been planning this for at least a week before Helle went missing. And I think it was one of those, his opinion was, if that divorce writ got served, he was in a terrible position financially. He was going to lose custody of the children. He at one point had called the divorce attorney and asked her if infidelity was one of the reasons for the divorce. So he, like, that information was going to come out. He was in a terrible position in the court.
Yep.
So he wanted to take care of Helle before the writ got served, and that's why he was evading service. So on November 10th, Richard, so this is more than a week before she went missing, Richard bought a brand new $15,000 dump truck that was supposed to be delivered on November 13th. He said that he bought it for spreading gravel on another property that they owned in Newtown. It was like 600 yards from their Newfield Lane property. And I believe it was a piece of land that they were buying to build a house.
Okay.
I believe. So he said he bought this new dump truck to spread gravel, but he asked that a hitch be installed on it so that he could tow things,
Yeah.
like wood chippers. I don't know. Just
Maybe.
spitballing. Maybe wood chippers. The delivery of that truck was delayed, so that didn't work out in his favor. That same day, he called a tree service in Norwalk to ask about renting a large wood chipper because, he needed to clean up limbs on his property from the snowstorm on the 18th that he didn't know about.
Yep, he sure did.
On November 13th, Richard ordered a large chest freezer. And then he drove to Brewster, New York for a flathead shovel and fireproof gloves. I'm sure he passed multiple stores along the way to New York at places that would have carried these items, but drove to New York to get them. So on November 14th is when Richard rented the wood chipper to be picked up on November 18th. November 17th, Crafts picked up this large chest freezer, which was not found on the property when they searched.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. On November 18th, Crafts tried to rent a wood chipper from Darien Rentals. So the worker told him that the Toyota pickup he was driving was too small to tow this machine. And Richard insisted that the chipper be held for him and paid for the rental even though he didn't have a truck to tow it until November 20th. Okay. They testified to this at trial. His insistence that he needed this wood chipper ASAP. So the investigators determined, based upon the blood spatter, that Helle was likely struck in the head at least twice with an object in the room. Now, they suspected it may have been he had one of those like heavy duty police flashlights in the bathroom that was in their room charging. So they think it was something like that. The blood spatter was not something that would match like a gunshot wound. Okay. It was like medium velocity spray or something like that. So they suspected it was just like a blunt object. They're not sure, whether she died from being struck in the head, whether he strangled her, but they think that she fell and hit her head on the mattress, which caused the blood smear. And then she was bleeding onto the carpet, which is what caused the blood stain. And then they think that he used the sheet and the bedspread that he later replaced at Caldor to sort of roll her up, bring her outside into the garage. They think that this new freezer was in the garage because remember the nanny said that they took him out the front door instead of the garage like they normally did. So they think he put her in the freezer until she was frozen solid. And then they think he took her body out of there, brought it to that other property that he had where he cut it up into pieces and wrapped it in plastic.
I was doing America's Test Kitchen classes. This is relevant, trust me, a while ago. And I learned that if you want to cut like chicken or something, they actually recommend that you freeze it first, or at least partially freeze it, and it makes it easier to cut. So perhaps he watched the same America's Test Kitchen.
And who's running America's Test Kitchen? Is it Crafts?
Girls.
Who run the world?
Girls. Yeah, so I would think
just a thought.
If you're cutting frozen chicken, right, there's like less juice. It makes less of a mess.
That's exactly it. It's not as slippery.
So that was the idea. So I have a grim fact for you going off of that. Mm-hmm. The book that I read said it would only take 6 or 7 hours to freeze a thin woman.
Thank God it would take a lot longer to freeze me. Somebody's going to find me in the amount of time it's going to take to freeze my ass.
So they think, basically he took the frozen body, brought her to this other Currituck lot that he had, cut her body up into pieces, wrapped it in plastic, and then brought it with him. November 20th is when he was able to actually secure the wood chipper and a truck that was big enough to tow it, which was the U-Haul truck, because remember, the delivery of his dump truck was delayed, so it spoiled his plans. He got a wood chipper that could cut logs 12 inches in diameter. So we're not talking about like cleaning up fallen limbs on your yard. I mean, like that is serious. That's serious wood.
You keep saying limbs.
Serious wood.
Branches and things.
Limbs. So again, the freezer he bought was never found. They think he disposed of it in some sort of landfill or dump or anything so that he wouldn't have to worry about the evidence. He returned the wood chipper on November 21st. So again, this is where I said that Joey Hine had sworn that he saw him on November 19th, but he couldn't secure. Yeah, he couldn't. secure the wood chipper. But again, what are the odds that he saw a different man chipping? I mean, he thought it was wood, but chipping a body into this lake. I think one guy got his dates wrong. Because again, that other person saw Crafts in the parking lot with the wood chipper.
You keep saying wood chipper, and my brain keeps going, how much wood would a wood chipper chip if a wood chipper could chip wood?
A wood chipper would chip that much wood if a wood chipper could chip wood.
Yep.
Wow.
That's good, right?
It was very good.
That's good. So Crafts was charged with the murder of his wife. And when this was going on, people asked what was his motive. And I'm so sorry, I have to. They said he loved her too much.
Oh, no.
It's so bad. I had to. I just saw it. It was literally listed as a bad pun by the news, but I had to. He loved her too much. So the case was originally brought in Danbury, but it was transferred to New London due to publicity. One of his claims was that he would never be able to get a fair trial anywhere in Connecticut because it was such a huge deal, and like the headlines were horrible, like chopped to pieces.
Small state.
Yeah. So there was no body, so the prosecutor had to convince the jury both that Helle was actually dead and that Richard murdered her. And this was all based on circumstantial evidence. So I just wanted to pause for a second. We've all heard the term circumstantial evidence, and we all think we know what it means. But there was actually there's jury instructions on circumstantial evidence, and I think it's very helpful. So this is specifically from Connecticut's jury instructions. It says there are, generally speaking, two types of evidence from which a jury can properly find the truth as to the facts of the case. One is direct evidence, such as the testimony of an eyewitness. The other is indirect or circumstantial evidence, that is, the inferences which may be drawn reasonably and logically from the proven facts. Let me give you an example of what I mean by direct evidence and circumstantial evidence. If you're looking out a third floor window and you see smoke rising out the window, that's direct evidence that there is smoke outside. It's also circumstantial evidence that there is a fire of some sort below the window.
Gotcha.
Okay. So I think that's very helpful.
Yeah.
So the inferences that you can draw from direct evidence and from missing evidence and putting the pieces together. So I mentioned this before, but his lawyer's argument basically was that Helle is not dead. And if she is dead, Richard didn't kill her. But he was saying she took off. She gone girled him. She left her kids. She took her bags. She packed up and she bounced.
Based on what track record are they
Right.
trying to like hang that argument on? Had she ever done anything like that before? Where
Richard had said that she had taken off, and she was a flight attendant. So there probably were periods where she was missing for like a few days at a time,
Sure.
but you can just check her
flight itinerary,
confirm. But he was really trying to push that home and say she took off. And then he was trying to say that she had this boyfriend in New York. And so he was trying to shift the blame. But again, they didn't have anything to go on to prove that that was the situation.
Right.
And her friends and family said she would not have left her 3 children behind. I mean, like, part of her concern with the divorce was their custody and making sure that they were taken care of. So they were like, she would not have left them. So remember I mentioned that the Crown Victoria had been towed to the state police lot, and that Dr. Lee had found the hair and blue fibers, human flesh, bone fragments in the trunk of his car. And that was really important. That was really important to tie him to it because it's his car. So the judge ruled that that evidence was inadmissible because the search warrant failed to include the car once it had been removed from the property. Which...
Come on.
Yeah, that's just such a that's such a bummer. That's one of those like technicalities that you hear of somebody like getting off on a technicality. But yeah, so none of that evidence could come in. So that was a blow for the state because it was a vital link into proving his guilt. But they carried on with what they had. And now the trial involved just about every forensic science known to man. They had serology, radiology, ballistics, hair and fiber experts, FBI experts. Even the manufacturer of the wood chipper testified. So one of the key pieces, again, to her death was this, the tooth.
Yep.
So the state called Dr. Carrazalus to testify. He was a dentist, an oral surgeon, and a forensic odontologist. And they also called Dr. Lowell Levine, who was, this is very interesting, the part-time director of forensic science for the New York State Police. But in 1983, using German dental records, he'd help identify the remains of Joseph Mengele, who was the Nazi criminal infamous for the experiments on concentration camp prisoners. And for the U.S. Congress, he established that the corpse of President John F. Kennedy was indeed Kennedy. And he also identified victims from the Ted Bundy case.
Oh, jeez.
So really important odontologist. Both of them agreed with reasonable scientific certainty that at least one of the tooth caps that they found had been placed in the mouth of Helle Crafts by her dentist.
Wow.
And then this is wild. In preparation for trial, Dr. Carver obtained a frozen pig carcass that was fed through a wood chipper.
Oh, no.
And they videotaped it, and the shape of and marks of the pig was dead. It was frozen pig carcass.
Oh my God, I would hope so.
Yeah, it doesn't, not that it makes it any better, but like you guys, your faces were concerning me. So they did that to show that the shape and the marks on the pig's bone chips after this process were similar to the shape of Helle's bone fragments. And they used a young pig because of its size and the skin, which is similar to human skin in thickness and has the same amount of hair. That is a very grim fact.
Ed Gein is listening.
What
about that skin?
And again, they showed this video at trial to show the destructive nature of the wood chipper. But I think that's really smart because, I have not seen. Well, actually, I happened to see a wood chipper in operation today while I was driving to court, which is it's just so fortuitous. But I mean, like, you'd think that there would be more evidence than just these tiny bone fragments. But I guess they were saying that really the only thing that was left on the lakeshore was like the heavier pieces that fell that Richard didn't account for. Like he thought that all of it would be sprayed into the river, but that like some of these pieces fell beyond the point that he thought that they, or before the point that he thought that they would. And then Dr. Lee testified as the cleanup hitter. He testified for 3 days, touching base on all the major forensic evidence, which that would be exhausting to be like on your game
for 3 consecutive days.
For that many hours at a time. So the defense tried to cast doubt in the case because they found they found the fingernail and there was a tiny piece of flesh attached to it. That had a piece of fingerprint on it, a partial print. Yeah.
I cannot believe this.
So they couldn't match it to Helle's. So they had an explanation for that. Now they did. There was nail polish on the fingernail, and they actually matched the nail polish to one of the bottles of Helle's nail polish that was in her home.
God. But this is what I think of when I think of like forensic evidence. Like it is this crazy matching and wow.
So they couldn't match the fingerprint and they had an explanation for this. So first of all, the state police did not dust the Crafts house for Helle's fingerprints because why wouldn't her fingerprints be all over her own home? And they didn't think that it would have any significance whatsoever. But the piece of flesh that had the partial print was from the edge of the fingernail. And now they were saying that not all organizations roll fingers to produce prints. They just take the flat fingerprint when they do it. The FBI and Interpol roll the fingers, but not Pan Am. Now, I think that's now standard practice to roll the fingerprints because I've had fingerprints taken for like background checks and the bar exam and like stuff like that. And they definitely roll your fingerprints. But so the fingerprints they had for Pan Am, they had not rolled them. So the police having only those fingerprints couldn't match it from that side of her finger. Wow. So they made a big deal about that, saying, you found this fingerprint, so you can't match it to her. So they think the prosecution just failed to really drive home the fact of why they couldn't match it to her fingerprint. And now, although defendants are usually counseled against it, Richard Crafts testified for a day and a half. So he testified that Helle had brought up divorce over the years. It was usually a way for him to change his behavior. He said that she seemed set on the idea in the fall of '86. And he said that he thinks his cheating was a sore point for her.
Maybe that was something that was a deal breaker.
An empath, I'm sensing that you did not like me cheating on you.
So he said, the last day that he was explaining that, she was seen by anyone else, he said it was really mundane. He said the morning that she left, he said she left the morning of the 19th, which is the day that he brought them to his sister's house. She said, "I'm leaving now," and left. And he said that he thought that she went to the sister's house in Westport. The large freezer that he used, no, he just bought that because he wanted to store large quantities of frozen foods because Helle was the treasurer of a co-op. The wood chipper? No. He just rented that to clear some brush on that Currituck property. Now, the fact that the wood chipper was designed for logs like 1 foot in diameter might have been a little bit of overkill for the brush. I think I mentioned that before.
1 foot, you say?
For the limbs. So he also testified about he had 3 interviews with the police when it was all said and done. And he said he thought, he knew that he had the right to remain silent. He had been read his Miranda rights, but he didn't think it was necessary to stay silent because he believed that Helle was alive. She was fine.
That is a good argument for him to make, but wrong.
Right. Also, I don't care if you're guilty or innocent. When the police talk to you, you shut up.
Yep.
You shut up.
Yep.
You shut up. That's coming from a lawyer. Not legal advice. So regarding the dark patch on the rug, Crafts again said he had 2 kerosene heaters. When the electricity failed, he'd placed one in the family room and one of the larger ones in the master bedroom. While he was refilling it, he'd allowed the kerosene to overflow and had left a spot on the carpet. He'd knocked the cap off of the kerosene heater and that left a soot mark. So he needed to get rid of the rugs. Isn't it interesting, though, that he had these kerosene heaters that he was putting throughout the house, but he rushed the family out because it was cold and the power went out and there was no heat. And then this is my favorite. So remember the November 20th. So 2 days after the last time she was seen, he told the nanny, Helle called. She's in Denmark with her sick mother.
Right.
When he was asked to explain this, he said, I met Helle's Danish friend, Helle Meyendorf.
Of course.
Yeah, that Helle.
Yeah, so I was just talking about a completely different Helle. Like, it was completely different.
Sounds like your kid's giving reasons why they did
Right.
something.
Because.
It wasn't me.
It was, yeah. So Crafts told the court, I never raised a finger of anger. I never raised a finger in anger at Helle in my life. I didn't use a chainsaw or a wood chipper in any way to dispose of her body. I believe she's alive. I certainly hope she is. I hope she's coming home soon. I believe it to be true. So the prosecutor got to question him as well, asked him about his time with Air America because of that CIA training. Mm-hmm. And Richard said, I didn't work for the CIA. And if I did, I wasn't aware of it.
It sounds like something a CIA person would
Right, right. A man has no name. Said he wasn't aware of it and had received no CIA training. So casual.
Uh-huh.
And then he was asked if he knew that there were any places closer by that may have had wood chippers other than Darien, Connecticut. And he said that he wasn't looking for one that had a large opening. He said he didn't have a discussion with the guy about whether his Toyota pickup truck could haul it. He said he didn't talk to the guy about holding the machine and paying him even though he didn't have possession of it. So basically, he just testified in complete contradiction to all of the testimony that the jury had already heard from all the state's witnesses, which I mean is a tactic.
That's what I'm saying.
That is a strategy. It's a strategy. I also loved this a lot. So Keith Mayo, the PI, had testified for the prosecution on April 6th. So the defense attorney subpoenaed him to appear later on. Now, this was on April 25th, which shows that the defense clearly underestimated the length of the state's case, which I believe was 9 weeks long. So a Connecticut subpoena is good for 60 days. And by the time that the defense attorney wanted to call the PI back, the subpoena had expired. So the defense had neglected to serve another one. And without one, the PI refused to appear in court. So the defense attorney sent a sheriff to serve the new subpoena, but the PI avoided service. And after several tries, the sheriff chased the PI at high speed into New York, where he threw the paper at his car. which they said wasn't good enough. So basically, the defense attorney wanted to call the PI back to the stand, and he was trying to say that Keith Mayo framed Richard Crafts. He was trying to say that he had the opportunity to frame him and plant evidence and reap the reward in publicity and cash, naturally. And he said, you know, that the PI had access to the Kraft home and could have taken potential evidence, such as the self-addressed envelope that was located at River Road, which, very interesting, they said that that envelope went through the wood chipper and came out like pristine. Apparently it had like nicks on it, but it came out pristine. I cannot imagine there's circumstances where it would like perfectly go through the blades to not have any marks on it.
It's like vertically
thin. It's very thin, I guess.
I mean, it just like the stars had to align for that to happen. The state called a few rebuttal witnesses, including this Helle Meyendorf, who said that she did not call the Kraft house on November 20th and say that she was going to visit her sick mother. So this, all in all, the state had called 86 witnesses. The defense called 33 witnesses, and the state had more than 650 exhibits, which really interesting. I just heard this afternoon that the debate trial had over 100 witnesses and over 600 exhibits. So like the whole like husband-wife murder apparently requires lots of exhibits and witnesses. So they each got 2 hours each for closing argument. The state's attorney told the jury that Helle was dead. Why would she have left her children? Would she have told her mother to send her a pair of pants if she had intended to disappear? Would she have paid the divorce lawyer a $2,500 retainer? She wanted a divorce, not escape. Like she's dead. She did not leave. The defense said that if Helle Crafts was a good mother, then Richard Crafts was a wonderful father. And especially in view of his shortened life expectancy from his cancer. Would he orphan his children? Could a man be jailed on the basis of 2/3 of an ounce of bone and 5 cubic centimeters of blood? So the jury deliberated for 17 days, which I believe was a record for the state at that time.
Wow.
There was one juror who refused to convict, Mr. Warren Maskell. He had, this is a bizarre aside, but he had actually crashed into a utility pole on the way home from court. He ended up in the hospital with a fractured skull and 2 broken ribs. Apparently he suffered from epilepsy, and I think he had like a seizure while he was driving home. So the state said they were willing to proceed without him, so they must have had alternates. But the defense attorney wanted to wait before he consented to that. Another juror visiting this Maskell in the hospital gave him a copy of this book, which he said he later regrets having done. It was a novel about a man who narrowly escapes conviction for a murder he has not committed.
Who gives somebody a book like that while he's a juror on a murder trial?
That guy who regrets it later on. So I guess this other juror encouraged the guy to return following the July 4th break, and the guy agrees and he comes back. And now after that, the relationship between this Mr. Maskell and the rest of the jury began to deteriorate. Yeah. Now they said that this juror, Mr. Maskell, actually violated the judge's orders. Apparently he was reading the newspapers, which is against the rules. And was discussing evidence with his wife, which is also against the rules. He believed Richard Crafts' testimony, and he took issue with the fingerprint that we talked about. So on a Friday, they kept talking to him. They were going through the evidence. They were saying, like, look at the totality of the circumstances. Like, they were, trying to show them his point. So on a Friday, he said, okay, you guys are right. I'm ready to vote for conviction. But another juror wanted the weekend to think about it again, and by Monday, Mr. Maskell had changed his mind again.
Oh my gosh.
So on July 16th, the jurors sought guidance from the judge and were given a Chip Smith instruction. That's the name of it in Connecticut. It's the judge gives them an instruction where the minority in the deadlocked jury should examine the majority's opinion closely in order to try to reach a unanimous verdict. So when the jurors are like, we need help, we don't know what to do, they give this instruction. So the jurors went back in and they said, okay, who's willing to change their mind? Who's ready to change their mind? And they all said, well, none of us. So one of the jurors was like, all right, well, let's order dinner. And Mr. Mascal was like, nope, and bounced. Just left the room. He refused to
do that.
Apparently. He refused to deliberate any longer, would not come back. The judge summoned the jury, but Mr. Mascal was gone. He just left. So the judge declared a mistrial around 9 p.m.
I was going to ask that. Oh, no.
Now, the state's attorney said bad things about Mr. Mascal and said that he, didn't do his civic duty and that he was a coward.
Oh.
And he got sued. And I believe he paid a settlement for that.
Wow.
So that was not a good idea.
No.
But so the state, bless their hearts, they did not give up. They said, okay, we got 11 people to believe us. Like, we can do this. And they retried him. The defense got the case moved to Norwalk, Stanford because of all the prior publicity. And again, it was the defense's position that Crafts couldn't get a fair trial anywhere in the state. And actually, Crafts had a new lawyer for the second case because the private defense lawyer said he was $65,000 in the hole and he didn't want to defend him any longer. So
fair.
He ended up with a public defender. And by 1989, which is when his second trial started, his children refused to talk to him or visit him. Even they wouldn't talk to him even on the phone because they believed that he had killed their mother.
Oh, poor kids.
So his second trial commenced on September 7th, 1989. And the big surprise of this trial was that his brother-in-law, David Rogers, which is Kraft's sister, testified this time. And he said he made the comment that let them dive. There's no body. It can't be found. So that was crucial. And he also said to him that even if they discover the wood chipper, it would prove to be a dead end. Yeah. So, and when he was asked why he didn't come forward during the first trial, he said he feared revenge on his family if Richard was acquitted.
That's fair.
Yeah. So, and he also probably could have said that he didn't want to become an accessory after the fact because Richard had said these things to him and he didn't come to the police. So the second trial, the state had called 86 witnesses again, although they weren't all the same ones.
Jeez.
The state's case was 8 weeks instead of 9. The defense ended up calling 27 witnesses, and the jury deliberated for 4 days and convicted him of murder on November 21st, 1989. And then one of the jurors commented that it was based on a massive totality of the evidence.
That is perfectly said, because I can understand why you can't do it, especially without a full body, just on circumstantial. But it's like when you add everything you just told us and what they found and the testimony and all that, no question.
And the fact it's 3 years later, too, and she still hasn't shown up. So she mysteriously went away.
Right.
Nobody's heard from her, seen her, anything in 3 years. So it's like, if anybody was buying the argument that she just took off, it's way less plausible after 3 years.
Right.
Yep.
So it's like, what's the alternative? Like you're saying, she's not missing because she would have shown up eventually. And who else would have killed her? I mean, nobody else had the motive that he had or, the witnesses tying him to it. I mean, the circumstantial evidence was damning. So he was sentenced to 50 years in prison. And when he was brought to prison, the inmates chanted, "Chip, chip, chip."
Jeez.
Yeah. It's brutal.
Hazing.
So he appealed the decision. In 1993, the Supreme Court affirmed his conviction in a 4-1 decision. So actually, one of the judges felt that he should be entitled to a new trial because the jury should not have been permitted to hear the comments that Helle made to her friends prior to her murder. So they shouldn't have heard the fact that she said, if I go missing.
Is that when they say hearsay? Is that what they're arguing?
So they're saying it is hearsay. They're saying that these statements were coming in and that the defendant didn't have a chance to cross-examine her. Well, that's because he killed her.
Yeah.
So she wasn't there
she
to
was
say
cross-examined.
things. Yeah, she wasn't there to say things. So the majority said that the jury instructions were fine, that, the comments that she made were fine, that the jury had the right to hear the statements because it countered the defense's position that she simply disappeared and was still alive.
Yep.
And they said, too, with the extensive publicity, that he still got a fair trial because enough time had passed between his arrest and the first trial was 18 months later to reduce the overall prejudicial effect. And then he also complained about the dramatic headlines that the press made. But they said that, when they impaneled the jury, people said that even if they had seen the news, that they could be impartial. So you sort of have to take them on their word, even if they're lying, like, you know, they're under oath. So they had to take them at their word. So he actually, he's out. He served a dramatically shorter sentence, mostly because of an old sentencing law known as statutory good time that has since been changed. But the law allowed for large amounts of time to be taken off of a prisoner's sentence as a reward for good behavior and jailhouse jobs. And corrections has to apply the law that was in place at the time of sentencing. So this was 1990 that he was sentenced. So if you're sentenced today, you no longer get credit for good time like that. But previously it was, and I didn't write this down, so I'm just going off of memory. I think you got 12 days for every month that you served with no issue. And then you can add an additional 5 days if you have a job. So you can get 17 days total off of your sentence for each month. I think that is correct. I'm saying that. I think it's correct.
Grim fact.
Grim fact. So he also got 3 years credit for the time that he served between his arrest and his sentencing. And he only got 2 disciplinary infractions while he was in prison. It was just considered medium level offenses, but it doesn't say what they were for. And then he was let out 7 months early to transfer to a supervised program instead of being released to the streets after 32 years behind bars. And that made me think of the guy in Shawshank Redemption, where he just like got let out in the street after being in jail his entire life and did not know what to do with himself.
Yep.
So that's what I was thinking of. So yep, he's out. So he's just out living his life. So he served 33 years of his 50-year sentence. Yeah. So his crimes have inspired some pop culture items. So Fargo, the movie Fargo, is based on this. And in fact, the end of the movie, one of the characters is killed and their body is put through a wood chipper. If you're a fan of Forensic Files, episode 1 is the wood chipper murder, though it was actually called Medical Detectives when this episode aired, which Forensic Files is like a much
better name.
Much better name.
Yeah.
I'm not
alliteration.
I do not like Medical Detectives. So that is the insane story of Richard Crafts and the infamous murder of his wife, Helle.
Wow. That is insane.
Wood chippers.
You want me to say more? It's just insane. I don't know.
Yeah, there's no real
crazy.
good word to summarize your feeling on that case other than, hey, Richard, if you're listening, what's up?
Hello.
Because he's out. So
Yeah.
He is out.
Hey,
He's in his 80s though.
So he is not probably one of the people having
he's
trouble with
probably
a
having
podcast.
issues with starting and stopping and restarting.
Laura,
podcasts,
do the
yeah.
math. He was born in 1937.
To how old he is now?
Yes.
63.
Carry the two.
85.
Did you say 97, Colby?
I just threw out a number because she didn't say words, so I
was
just
napping.
not that you're not drunk enough to do it very fast.
But you
That's
think,
what we
you
need.
think about it now, so it is sort of infuriating that he's out, but he's that old, okay? So, like, he's going to die in prison. He doesn't serve any threat to society now. He really was only a threat to his wife, quite honestly.
True. Well, and again, this is the point of putting a sentence on somebody, and well, I guess he didn't serve his full sentence, but that's the point of having a sentence and serving it, and you're supposed to come out and you are it's in
Right.
you've served it. You're
I
done.
mean, and they still have laws in place now where you're eligible for parole after a certain amount of time. So that just those older laws where they had statutory good time, like when he was out, there was no supervision, and they sort of got rid of that, and now they have the parole system in place. But
Was the name of it really Statutory Good Time?
it is.
That just sounds
I was thinking the same thing.
very absurd.
Yeah.
Name of a law.
That's why they got rid of it.
Yeah.
Statutory good time. Yep. So if you are enjoying listening to Grimm, please rate and follow us wherever you listen to podcasts to make sure you don't miss any episodes. So we're now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and Amazon Music. Follow us on Instagram at Grimm Crime Podcast for information on future episodes and case photos, including the nipple belt if you listen to episode 3. If you want to send us a case suggestion or just say hi, you can email us at grimcrimepodcast@gmail.com. We hope you enjoyed listening on this terrifically terrifying, terrible Tuesday, and we hope you learned something so that you can stay alive for episode 4.